I'm going door to door, and I finally find one person who's not going to threaten to call the cops on me. And she's interested, but she wants to see my Verizon ID. And I know it's my fault. I didn't have the Verizon ID, but I had to go get to it. So I told her to be 1 second. I'm going to go back to my car and get it. Well, in the time between me going to my car and coming back to this lady's door, she called Verizon and asked them, "Hey, do you have door-to-door people going in this retirement community?" And Verizon said, "That person is trying to scam you. Do not do business with them."
Sean, you worked for a Cydcor company in Philadelphia for 6 months selling door-to-door FiOS.
Yeah.
And, every message that I get, there's a certain realm of similarity to everything. But then there's also these little unique things that everybody talks about. And when I was rereading your message, you had talked about how in your office, they had started new hires, teaching them the interview process very quickly. And the one sentence in your message that really stood out to me was the following. You said, "Once you know the interview process, you know just how much you have to lie."
Yeah.
Which, definitely stands out, because in any legitimate business, if you're doing the interviewing, lying should not be on the table. Lying should not be anywhere in that, especially here's how to do it to new recruits. So can you explain a little bit more about your rationale for that? Once you know the interview process, you know just how much you have to lie.
Yeah. I mean, we were supposed to basically get someone through the entire interview process without them knowing it's a door-to-door sales job. When we would go over the process, we knew exactly how we were supposed to respond to things. At the very most, what you would say is that we follow up with customers face to face. If they ask you, like, "Is this a door-to-door job?" You say, "Well, yeah, we meet up with customers face to face," and that's it. And you move on. You get them past that as fast as possible. And you start off with that, like that's what you're saying about the entry level and the account management positions. And then, of course, you keep lying when you talk about the next two positions, but you don't realize that until you're in those positions. So like you're talking about like even the base pay and stuff like that, you're lying about because you're talking about how you're going to get like, they would ask you like, "Okay, well, like I don't want to do like just pure commissions. Like what is the pay like?" And then you tell them that you have a base pay of about $500 a week. Which sounds pretty good if you don't like have a job, already lined up. You're like, yeah, I mean, worst case scenario, at least I'm making something. But then we don't say that base pay goes away in an account management. And it's not like we're just brushing it under the rug. We're actually lying about it because we say that this is the pay for the first two phases. But what happens is you get that base pay for the first like entry level. So if you don't get any sales, you're still getting $500 a week. And then once they promote you and you're like getting sales, then they slowly take that base pay away. And so suddenly you're just pure sales. And so you don't realize that you're not making anything until midway through the second phase. And when everyone knows that you're lying about those things, it's so easy to just say like the easiest question for me, because I talked to a lot of people in my office that were unhappy by the end. It was so easy to like kind of like break that facade for them that this was like, a good opportunity. And like, you just ask them like, why do you think they're not lying about the next part? Because once you start trying to make up excuses for that, like you're reading from the same script. The lies and what you think is true are both on the same script. And like, why do you think that the second part isn't also a lie? And there's absolutely no good response to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Normally in any context, if you're lying about at least one major thing, there's no reason to believe that there's not going to be lies somewhere else down the road too.
Yeah.
So where were you at when you first realized that you were just blatantly lying to people? And were you able to voice your concerns to anyone, or was that kind of on the hush hush?
I first started doing interviews, second round interviews for them in November, and I had started in September, so it was about 2 months in.
Okay.
And my interviews were not very successful at first because I was actually interviewing people, which is not what you're supposed to be doing. You're not supposed to be like qualifying people. You're supposed to be convincing them to sign up. Like it doesn't matter how qualified someone is or if they're a good fit for the company or what have you. By the end of the interview,
treating them like a customer, right? Like you're treating them the same way you would when you're going door to door. You're using the same tactical verbal manipulation in a way.
Yeah. And they use the same thing. They would say like this part of the interview is like the rehash. This part of the interview is like the presentation. And you're supposed to be building a relationship the entire way. And it's, and then like about December, I kind of like switched my way of doing it because I realized that that's what they wanted was for me to just get as many people in as possible. And I guess I was telling myself, because at this point I was pretty bought in. I was telling myself that like, that's okay because, you know, they're going to get a part of this opportunity. And if they decide they don't want it, then they can just quit. Cause like no one's getting like stuck immediately. So, you know, I just thought it was okay, but that's not always the case. Because, you know, I'm doing this like at the height of COVID before we figured out, like before we have any vaccines or anything.
Yeah.
And I'm interviewing immunocompromised people that say they can't go door to door, and we're supposed to still lie to them, which I did, unfortunately, and get them through the interview as I was supposed to. Afterward, I told them this person's immunocompromised, or this person, another situation, this person is a single mom who can't work weekends. But like by the end, I guess I'd done such a good job of selling it that she was saying she could get a sitter and like she could still come in and all this other stuff. And I would take those papers and I would, you know, because I guess I was optimistic, think like I can tell them like this person's not going to be a good fit. Like they're not going to be able to do this. They're not going to be committed enough, which I thought is what they wanted to hear. But they're still going to offer those people jobs, and those people are still going to show up in the office, and you're still going to feel bad about all the things that you had to, the fact that you got them there. Because they didn't care if someone was immunocompromised during a pandemic, or if someone was a single mom and couldn't really put in the time commitment that was needed to do this job for less money than it was worth. And so, yeah, after a while, that kind of weighs on you. And that's when you kind of start to question things a little bit more.
In your message, you mentioned that you helped open up an office, and there was some kind of strange, you just mentioned erratic behavior of the two people that had been promoted. Would you mind kind of talking a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So my original team leader and his leader were super close. Like they lived together. They were best friends. They did everything together. And they went through the promotion process. My team leader did it in about a year, and the other guy did it in about 2 years. But they both got promoted out to open their own branch at the same time, and they both opened in the same office. They're the ones that got us into doing the interviews early. And the reason, like, they wanted to do that because they wanted us to be able to build our own teams organically, like without them having to give us people, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And so I don't know how planned out some of the things they did were. I feel like a lot of times, one of the things I said in my email, like for instance, one of the things I said in my email was that they invited me to a party around Christmas at one of their houses, and I were at their house, and I went, and it turns out it was just the three of us, and you know, that's kind of weird, but it's okay. And we started drinking. And once I was like fairly not like all there, they started grilling me about the business. And I don't think that that was a plan on their part. I think it was just they were so, because this is what the business does, right? They were
Yeah.
so like only thinking about the business that they saw an opportunity, and without like really thinking about it, they just started questioning me, because I guess maybe they had been wondering like if I was like completely in the business at this point. And that wasn't just happening to me. Like this kind of thing was happening to everyone. And once they like once they opened their own office, just more and more slip ups started happening, because I think they were so they were so bought in that they didn't realize some of the red flags.
Mm-hmm.
And like it was obvious that like they hadn't been sleeping very much. Everyone was talking about it. Things were happening. Like one of them mentioned, like when we were going over the interview process, that like we were talking about the assistant manager position, and we used to always say the assistant manager position was salaried for some reason. That
Right.
was the weirdest lie to me, because like it doesn't take very much to realize it's not. At least with branch management, it takes so long to get there. But like we had assistant managers walking around, we knew they weren't salaried because they were going out to the field like everyone else. What are they not
Yeah.
getting paid for that? So he like just like randomly threw out like, by the way, the assistant manager position like isn't salaried, but we don't want them to know that. Like it's also it's also commissions. And everyone like he thought it was like nothing. And then he like walked out of the room, and you could just see like the like shocked faces on like everyone in there, because everyone still thought that it was salary. And I like they just didn't realize that. So you have that happening. You have situations where one of the managers we found out was trying to get out of there and open a new office in Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like so interested in like getting out of the office and opening a new one that he was like rushing this other guy into branch management by just throwing people at them, to the point where like it wasn't even subtle. Like this person had like
Yeah.
3 trainees, none of them were ready to go out by themselves, which was not normal, because like no one else even had a trainee. Like and so like it was because he was like the chosen one, but they were doing it so, which like happens all the time, but I think usually they're a little bit more subtle about it.
Yeah.
And so people are asking like, why is he trying so hard to get out of this office and move to Pittsburgh? And of course later, I mean, like when you think about it, you realize it's because he's trying to get up the pyramid, because he's not at the top of the pyramid, even though everyone acts like you are at that point.
So one of the excuses that a lot of people will use to defend these companies is, well, this guy just had a bad owner,
Mm-hmm.
or some people who are owning offices shouldn't be owning them in the first place. They're not cut out for the business, and they're able to find specific blame within this realm of deception, which is Devil Corp.
Yeah.
So what I mean, I guess it could be easy to just chalk it up to, well, you, Sean, we're just in a really bad office, and this office was being run by people who didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah.
Is there reason to believe that that's not true, and that this is more of a systemic thing based on your experiences?
Yeah. So, I mean, as far as the things that like the things that they were doing, they were just like the bad parts of what they were doing they were just doing it worse than what most owners do, because like they were just doing it more sloppily. But like the same thing is happening at every office, basically the same kind of like, I've got to figure out a way to break down this person's wall so I can figure out if they're in the business or not. All of that stuff is happening. Like the office I was at before was a very successful owner before it got promoted out. And he was doing all of the same things. He was just doing it in a more professional way. Mm-hmm. And even just like talking about that office, another thing that was happening was, when I think about that office, there were 4 or 5 failed owners there. at that office. And they would say like, oh, it's because of COVID. Oh, this person got, they failed because COVID started. And that's what they said. And, at the time that made sense, but more and more failed owners kept showing up. And you've got to wonder like, why are so many owners failing? It can't just be because of COVID. And if it is because of COVID, then why is Larry not providing them more support to keep them from failing? Because it seems like he would want that, right? There was a situation where I was going door to door, and they made me go door to door in basic like a retirement community, which said no soliciting on it, obviously.
Of course.
And I asked to be given a different territory, and they wouldn't do it. And so I'm going door to door, and I finally find one person who's not going to threaten to call the cops on me. And she's interested, but she wants to see my Verizon ID. And I know it's my fault. I didn't have the Verizon ID, but I had to go get to it. So I told her to be 1 second. I'm going to go back to my car and get it. Well, in the time between me going to my car and coming back to this lady's door, she called Verizon and asked them, hey, do you have door-to-door people going in this retirement community? And Verizon said, that person is trying to scam you. Do not do business with them. Yeah. And so by the time I get back, she's just like everyone else, and she's going to threaten to call the cops on me now. So, so later I go and talk to the owner of that branch about it. And he says, Sean, you've got this way of looking at the world like everyone's out to get you, and we need to get you out of that. And like, I'm like, that's just like text. Like if you look at an encyclopedia for the word gaslighting, or a dictionary for the word gaslighting, that's what that would be, right? Like that's the most like it's almost cliche at that point. So it's the same thing. It's just packaged in like a more subtle and like palatable version. It's still happening though. Like the thing with the hiring, that was happening at that office, with hiring people that had no business being in the company. And like the thing with COVID, we had somebody at that office that got that tested positive for COVID, and they didn't tell us. Like I found out later that like after I was already in the field, I found out that they had COVID, and that like, and I have to decide if I want to keep going or not. And like I even call the branch manager and ask him, hey, is it okay if I don't? And he's like, oh, I mean, like, I really want you to get those hours so you can get paid. And I'm just like, okay. And so like, I try and go to like one more door, and I just feel like the worst person in the world. So finally I like call him and tell him that I don't want to do this. And like, I need like, you're going to have to give me a break to get tested, because I don't think this is the right thing to do. And again, he's like, well, I want to make sure you're working while you're not doing that, because like, I don't want you to just have like a week off. So he was like making me do interviews and stuff, even though like I'm not getting the base pay at that point because I'm an account manager. Yeah. So I'm literally getting paid nothing, and I'm still working. It's the same thing. People just figure out better, more palatable ways to package it, depending on what office you're at.
Yeah. Yeah. And it should not be surprising, based on everything we know about how these companies operate, that in the period of time where if you were even around somebody that had COVID, the next thing you do is get tested or self-quarantine or something. It's no surprise that these idiots who are running these offices are going to do the gaslighting. They're going to do the manipulation because we want you to get paid. That's not why they want you out there. They want you to try to get signups. And it doesn't matter if you're a carrier of a virus that's killed 1 million people in this country. They need to make their money.
Yeah.
That tells you all you need to know about these people. But I want to go back to that Verizon example just to break down the logic behind what we heard. So you're selling Verizon Fios door to door.
Yep.
You had a Verizon ID, which you went back to get. She called Verizon themselves, and their response was, "You're getting scammed."
Yep.
like, what are we doing here? Like,
Yeah,
what?
it's insane. I was so close to. I got so mad later on, like because like this was like December. I stayed in for like 3 more months after this. Like because I was so close. I was like, is this like a liability issue? Like they don't want to be liable because of like, like some like is that what's happening? And he wouldn't tell me that. And like that's exactly what's happening. It's all a big liability issue. That's why the companies are all have different names. That's why.
Yeah.
uh,
I mean, in these interviews in the past, we've heard people who work at T-Mobile and Sprint stores say that you probably shouldn't sign up for anyone going door to door because they're probably a scam. There's this example of Verizon going door to door. Oh, you're being scammed. If the companies whose products you're selling are saying you're a scam, there's something wrong there. There's something wrong there in the Cydcor, Credico, Smart Circle, Cobra Group universe. But somehow the Larry Tannenbaum, Paulson, and Antoine Nora and all these big guys who are at the top of the pyramid and have been scamming people for decades are still scamming people today by convincing them they're running their own office legitimately, yet the parent companies, Verizon, T-Mobile, are going to call them scam companies.
yeah.
So this isn't me, this isn't you, this isn't the dozens of other people who have interviewed calling these companies scams. These are the actual companies whose products you're selling calling you scams.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you weren't there for very long, relative. I mean, 6 months.
Yeah.
So what was the final straw then? After you've seen all these things that you had trouble with, you've collected and kind of archived these instances.
Yeah.
What got you out?
Yeah. So around December, I had my first person on my team get promoted. And I wanted to make sure he was in the business because he seemed a little like he wasn't sure. And so I was kind of worried that he thought I was kind of worried that maybe he thought it was a pyramid scheme, which so I was like, I'm going to explain to him like, what the difference is. So I was talking about how like most pyramid schemes, the burden of loss falls on the people at the very bottom.
Yeah.
And that's why they're bad generally, is because if the company loses any money, the burden of loss goes entirely to the people at the bottom. All the money funnels up, and that's it. But since we offer a minimum base pay, the burden of loss is not on the people at the bottom because they're not buying products to sell. They're just salespeople going out there, and if they make sales, they get money. If they don't get sales, they don't lose money. So, how could that be bad? So I just explained that, and then I didn't think anything about it for a while. A couple of months later, we move out to our to this new office, and my team leaders run in his office, and sales aren't good because we open our new office. It's also in the Philadelphia area. So we're working a lot of the same areas that the old office was. And so we're getting a lot of the same people that we had just talked to 4 or 5 months ago. Right. And like, while every now and then you do get a couple of good people, but people that like want to buy, most of the time you're going to get people that are really mad that you're talking to them again. Cause even if it's been like 4 or 5 months, if you have the same random guy show up at your door, like, even if it's like a year apart, it feels like it was like, weren't you here yesterday? This is ridiculous, right. And, they're trying to gaslight us into thinking that we've never been to that neighborhood, even though like I was there. I know I've been there. You can't like, it might not look the same to you on Google Maps, but since we're out there, yeah, it's exactly the same. And so they're doing that to everybody. And then they're saying, if you want to get leads that aren't in Philadelphia, you've got to go and get the permit yourself. So I'm having to go out to these random towns, the city halls, to get permits so that I can get leads. And I'm told like, hey, this is going to be just your team's leads. And everyone else is still going to be stuck in Philadelphia until they get their own leads. Well, I go, and immediately the leads that I get for this one town are given to everyone in the office, which is bad because in the application, I'm told that we're only allowed to have one person soliciting at a time. And so people get arrested because they're not following a permit that has my name on it. And so that's not good. You have people getting arrested. The same thing's happening with everyone except for the guy that they're trying to promote so they can go to Pittsburgh, who gets his own leads whenever he gets his, and no one else gets to use them. So that's happening. I'm looking at the board because they have a board up there that eventually they decided to get rid of because it was killing morale of everyone's sales, which is the funniest thing I've ever heard. And I'm thinking, like, how is the office running? Like, how is the office still running? And I remember I was in the shower one morning and I'm thinking about it. I'm getting ready for work. And I'm thinking about the teach back I gave to that guy on my team about the burden of loss. And I'm like, well, the burden of loss isn't at the bottom. And then I think about it and I realize that the burden of loss is actually at the top of that small pyramid. And the burden of loss is on the branch managers. So, and then I really think about how the two team leaders are not doing well and how they've been acting super off. And everyone's noticed it. And I realized that they're in a bind.
Yeah.
That's whenever I start finally going back and Googling Credit Cow, which was the name that my manager in King of Prussia gave me as the overarching company name, which I never Googled before that for some reason. And that's when I found your videos, and I started to realize, like, it's not all what it's cracked up to be.
Yeah, I feel like if you are being fed really from day one, you're fed this idea of success and pie in the sky dreams, and this is the avenue to get there. But you see people that are higher up than you and they're struggling and noticeably struggling, and their behavior is changing because they're struggling. That's not a part of the narrative. So when you get those parts of the narrative that aren't supposed to be there, I mean, that's why all owners have to look successful. They might be driving a car from 1996, but they're in the office every morning and they're wearing their Sunday best and they're alert and they're ready and they're high energy. That's why a lot of owners are on things, is because they can't pull that off without that assistance.
Yeah.
But it would go against the narrative for them to appear otherwise. So yeah, when you start noticing, when you start really paying attention and looking, you know, my team leader is acting this way, my manager or whatever is doing this, it kind of goes against this ideal picture of the world that is painted by being a part of one of these unbelievable companies. So you said you found the slave circle, and then you said you were able to convince other people to leave as well, right?
Yeah.
So how did those conversations go?
So it was a little bit different for each person because, like, you know, like everyone's experience is kind of the same, but their sticking point's going to be a little bit different generally.
Yeah.
Because, like, you know, when you're in it, you know, the entry level in account management is bad. Like, it sucks.
Yeah.
No amount of someone telling you, like, this is bad is going to, like, convince you otherwise. But the more you think about it and the more you, like, start to think, like, well, why am I doing this? That's when it starts to, like, stick out. And that's when I started getting more information too. So the first few people I talked to were people that I had trained. So I wanted to make sure that, like, the people that I felt responsible for kind of, like, getting indoctrinated into it, I wanted to make sure that they got out first and foremost. And so that was pretty easy since I was the one that told them everything. It's mostly just, like, you know, look at the interview process, you know, what makes you think that they're not lying about the next part. Well, look at how the two people that are running our office right now are acting, how they talk about how they can't they still have to stay for another hour to do more meetings with Ken. Like, that's not what we were told, you know.
Yeah.
After that, I let's see, there was one time we were going out to the like, this all happened in about the span of a week. I talked to two people that I trained, and after that, the next day they made me ride out to the field with the guy that was being given all the trainees. And I remember I got dropped off next to last. And so it's like me, him, and two of his trainees. And one of his trainees gets dropped off first because I guess they just got sick of him training her and just wanted to just send her out and hope for the best. And so they're driving me out to where I'm supposed to go. And I remember the second he dropped her off, he just started talking, like just saying the worst things about how she's dumb, how she can't like pick up on anything, and how he gets the worst trainees, and how it's ridiculous, and how like he just wish he could like figure something out to like get through her dumb head, and like all this other stuff. And it was just like that's like a person, man. Like you can't just talk about her like that. And so after that, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to tell her. So I called her after I got out on the field, after he dropped me off. And she like switched like that because she was kind of sick of him too. And that's when I found out that he was getting prepped to take over. So that way the other guy could go to Pittsburgh. So from then on, you know, because we all knew that he was kind of like being like the chosen boy at this point, because he was getting so many trainees, but we didn't have anything like solid to like tell people about it. So after that, once I started telling people about that, also, it was just like dominoes. Because the next guy I talked to was hired about the same time as the guy that was like the chosen one or whatever. And he had like barely made any progress because they hadn't been giving him anybody.
Yeah.
And so, and no one's good at interviewing at this point. I'm me and the two branch managers are the only people bringing anyone into the business at this point, because no one's ready to interview yet, but they wanted everyone to be doing it. So, so I talked to the next guy. His thing was, he started at the same time and he's way behind this other guy, even though they're both about equal in sales. Because he's just not giving anybody, and that doesn't seem right. So then I tell him about Pittsburgh, and he's immediately like, yeah, that makes sense. This is ridiculous. And then after that, we just start talking about the rest of the business, because one of his big things was his car is getting run into the ground, and they're not compensating him at all for it. And then obviously you just follow that up with look at how erratic they're acting. Do they look happy? Do they look like they climbed to the top of the mountain? Like, no, they look like they're in the middle of the summit of Everest right now. Like they're still not even close. So he quits immediately. He just walks right in. It's funny. I met him outside in the parking lot, and like during like in between like morning meetings. And he just immediately went in and quit. And I was like, oh man, they're gonna know that it was me now. And so after that, I talked to the next guy that started before me, because I felt bad because he was like so in it, but like they were so mean to him. Like just the way that people talk about people in that business is not okay. Like just because like, you know, yeah, it's going to take somebody like a little bit longer to pick up the pitch sometimes, but that doesn't mean like they're stupid or dumb or anything. Like they're still going to get it eventually. It's basic memorization, has nothing to do with your intelligence. Yeah. But that's not how they act. That's not how they treat people. And so, and you know, there's a level of like, I never saw the worst of the discipline and stuff as far as like yelling at people, things like that. I know that happens. I never received that. I think they figured out pretty quickly that that's not a good way to motivate me. But for the guy that was in it longer than me, that was the way to motivate him, was to just yell at him, like, and it would come out of nowhere. Like, I remember I was talking to him one time, and apparently he had made a sale in New Jersey, and we weren't supposed to make sales in New Jersey anymore. And like the branch manager, this was the branch manager from the more established company that was doing things more subtle. He walked up and he's like, and he was just like, "Hey man, how's it going? Oh, you want to make me look like an asshole in front of everybody? I heard you made a sale in New Jersey." And like, it just comes like out of nowhere. Like, that's not how you talk to people that work for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is not that like, and so I knew I had to talk to him. And for him, and this is where I want to bring up something else, is when you're breaking the glass and letting them know, like, hey, this isn't real. You're not just making, like, it's not a hopeful thing that you're telling them. Because up until this point, they've known that they've thought that there's a chance that they could make it and that they could, be financially free and everything's going to be great. And you basically have to tell them that that's not the case. And I remember I told him, and he had been working at a car wash, like as a manager at a car wash before. And he was just like, what do I do? I don't want to be a manager at a car wash anymore. I can't go back to doing that. And I didn't have a good answer, because, the answer is you've got to just get a normal job, which that's the last thing anyone in the business wants, because that's why they're in the business. But all I can say is I have a normal job now. And I'm 10 times happier than I ever was in the business. Yep. So it's difficult, especially when you're talking to people and maybe they don't have the best resumes. I mean, you've heard it from people that you've talked to on here, though. Like, you can take the stuff from this job and turn it into something on a resume. It can be done, especially when you've been lying to people in interviews for the last 6 months. It's not that hard. But it's difficult to tell someone that this isn't real. But I told him, and I brought up the stuff with the car because that was a big thing for him too. I brought up the way that they'd been talking about him the entire time. I brought up the fact that they don't look happy, because he saw it too. Mm-hmm. And I haven't kept up with him. I don't know how he's doing now, but I have to assume he's doing better than he was then. The last few people, it was just more of the same. Once everything adds up and you see it all laid out, it's obvious that that's how it is, especially when you're in the situation that I was in.
Sure.
And that office, I assume, I checked the other day, and their office has stopped posting on Instagram, and the two leaders that I worked with are now showing up in a different office's Instagram. So I can't help but assume that they have been shut down and that they are now on a retrain.
Yep. On a retrain.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Whenever you like it probably sounds weird to someone who doesn't know the ins and outs of this, but telling these people that it's not real, like it does kind of shatter their belief, because from the time they probably saw the job posting, before they even came in for the first interview, they've been sold this idea of this is an opportunity to get to management and 6 figures in a year. Mm-hmm. And this isn't your normal job. And then once you get into the opportunity meetings, they just bombard you with all these bullshit lies about how you make all this money. And then there's the people you promote out, you get a percentage of that money, and you're making 6 figures and then 7 figures within a few years. but it's all lies. It's all
Yeah.
BS. The amount of people that actually are able to make that much money, you could probably count on one or both of your hands.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense. But you're selling this lie to everybody that comes in, knowing that over 99% of them are not going to make it, just numerically. It doesn't have anything to do with work ethic. It doesn't have anything to do with drive.
Yeah.
It's just mathematical, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, when you're in it, you believe it. So when someone comes along who's in it, you know, it's not just some outsider, but it's you. You're the team leader, and you're saying to people, this isn't real. It's kind of like, well, what the hell?
Yeah.
Well, now what do I do? It's like, it's literally like leaving a cult. It's like,
Yeah.
well, this is everything I've known for this long.
Yeah.
And now the veil has been torn. And now I can see everything clearly now.
Yeah.
It's not a good feeling at all. And you've mentioned in this interview, you freely admitted that you lied to people,
Yeah.
and that you did things that you're not necessarily proud of, which I know can be very difficult to come to that realization. I know I lied to plenty of people when I was in Smart Circle for 15 months. You just do.
Yeah.
This has been, you know, it's been a year plus, year and a half, 2 years since you've gone through this. How have you been able to kind of make peace with that time, and really what made you want to unearth all of this in this interview today?
I yeah, I've been able to kind of accept that this was just what I had to do. Like it was a job. If I wasn't doing it, someone else would have done it.
Yeah.
I, there are certain ones I do feel bad about because I feel like they were using my specific skill set in situations to convince people to join. There were situations in sales where like I was trying to sell to somebody and his aunt died in the middle of, like, he found out his aunt died in the middle of a sale.
Oh
And
God.
yeah, and I tried to finish the sale. I'm not proud of that. I think one thing, and I don't know if this is a universal thing, but one thing I've noticed is it's been a year and the dreams of about this and about the situations I was in and about the people I worked with haven't stopped. I guess what I'm saying is I feel like I have to do something to make peace with it. I have to do something to help somebody because I feel like I play too much of a part to get too many people in. And as much as whenever I first reached out to you back in September, right before that, somebody I didn't talk to that was at the company that I was working for reached out to me and asked me why I didn't talk to him before I quit, because he found out after he quit that I had been talking to like everyone and I just didn't talk to him. And it was the chosen guy that was supposed to be railroaded into management. And I was afraid to talk to him because I thought maybe he would, because like I didn't know all the legality and everything. And I was just afraid of talking to somebody who was too bought in.
Right.
And so I just didn't do it. And so he finally got out probably like 4 or 5 months later. So it could have gone a lot worse for him. I don't think he even made it to management. But he texted me and asked me why I didn't talk to him before like he was in it for so much longer. And I didn't have a good answer because I was scared. And I don't want to keep. I want to at least try to reach as many people. And I feel like, worst case scenario, if someone does come along this video or your videos and they are super bought in, maybe too bought in, but then they see the video of me and they used to work with me, then maybe there's a chance that they could break through and maybe they change their mind. I don't know.